Hi everyone, I'm Dr. David Day. I'm the CEO of Samurai Digital Security. I don't have much of a coding background. Several decades ago, maybe 30 decades ago, I used to be a programmer, but back then things were very different. I certainly have no experience of web application programming, and apart from testing web applications and the very limited amount I need to know, I certainly wouldn't be comfortable writing a web application. And I haven't had any experience in writing plugins for WordPress. So the goal of this video is that I want to share a journey that I've been on, a journey about learning how to use AI for coding, for how to use it to, in this particular instance, code a plugin. So if you have a curiosity about how AI can be used for generating computer code, then I'm probably going to give you some useful insight, particularly if you're not already a professional coder, or maybe your coding expertise is limited. And perhaps you're thinking, hey, maybe this is a solution to my problems, right? Maybe this is what I need to enable me to get functional code working without having to be a coder. So I'll share with you my findings, and then you can make your own decision about whether you think that's possible or not. So let me start off discussing the project that I decided to work on. I decided that it would be useful for us to have a scoping application to determine the number of days that were necessary for a system penetration test based upon a series of questions that a user would be asked for, and their responses would then be used to generate an estimate of how long that system penetration test would take. Things like number of dynamic web pages, whether it's behind a firewall, how many user accounts are there, does it use an API, and so forth. These kind of questions were used to generate an estimate, rather, of how long it would take to perform a system penetration test. So I looked around and made a decision based on what I'd read in the research, which I found that Anthropic's Claude Opus seemed to be most of the programmers' choices in terms of being the most useful for creating functional code. So I started by getting access to Anthropic's console, buying the professional service, upgrading from Sonnet to Opus, and then I started to generate code. I started asking Anthropic, in very simple terms, to generate me a plugin that would allow me to send information via a system prompt and send in API key via a system prompt, so I could use the API key to connect with Anthropic, to create me some code, and then I was going to install the plugin into WordPress, and bingo, everything would work immediately within a few hours of trying. Of course, that's not how it worked out. Although it did look very promising at the start. So in the initial setup, for example, I found I got very satisfactory early results. So when I asked it to create the basic plugin that took the system prompt information as a plugin setting and took the API key as a plugin setting, it gave me some code. I copied the code into the appropriate WP content plugins folder, and it didn't work first time. There was a few minor errors, and I sort of went back to Anthropic and said, it isn't working, Claude, please can you help me with this is happening. And it didn't take long, right? It was maybe 2 or 3 iterations, and it generated code which I could copy into the plugin settings in WordPress, and it was functional. However, I didn't understand what the code did. I was incredibly lazy in the early parts of this experiment. It was quite simply generate the code, cut the code, paste the code. So other than a little bit of elementary knowledge in where to place things to get plugins to work within WordPress. I didn't really need, I didn't know any more than that, or I wasn't making an effort to know any more than that, is probably the more accurate way of putting it. So the challenges and the issues occurred as I started to increase the requirements that I wanted the app to do. And these difficulties arose principally because of Claude's difficulty in understanding my objectives and understanding what I'm telling it to do. So the more complex my requests, the poorer the code became. And I can't really put this fully at Claude's door, Anthropic's door, because it's very different when you speak to a person to when you're speaking to an AI. People can make intuitive jumps to understand your reasoning in a much better way than AI can. So the code that the AI was producing, it didn't ask any questions. For example, so this is the thing, right? You ask an AI to do a job and it will create some code for you. You cut that code and you paste it in. And chances are, if it's a particularly complex activity you've asked for, it's not going to work, or it isn't going to work the way you want it to. And this is because Anthropic doesn't come back with any qualifying questions. It doesn't come back and say, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Is this what you're trying to do? So if you're having a conversation with a developer or a systems analyst, for example, they would be asking you questions back. You'd have a two-way conversation where you're discussing what you want to achieve. If you're using an AI tool like Anthropic, it doesn't. It makes its best guess based on what you've told it and then produces code. And this caused a problem because as I was being lazy and just cutting and pasting this code in and it wasn't working, I was going back, I was saying, that's not working, try again. I got this error. That isn't what I wanted. And as the AI continually tried to understand what I meant, the code was becoming increasingly worse and more complex. It turned into a complete and utter mess in the end. So regardless of the initial success, things eventually started to go catastrophically bad as I started to increase my requirements and expectations of what Claude could do. So in the end, what I discovered was that you have to follow a few basic rules when you're telling the AI how to what you want it to code. One of the basic rules is to only make small changes at a time. Start with a very small POC, and then very gently make one small change. Don't try and put loads in. Don't try and put like 8 or 9, big changes in. It'll go catastrophically wrong. Make one small change. Test it. Does it work? Yes or no? So that's one of the things I learned, to make very small incremental changes. The second thing that I learned to get the best out of AI in coding is to be extremely clear about exactly what you want to achieve in the entire project. So the AI needs to know your objectives for the entire project from start to finish. And then you just start saying, let's start with it gently, though. Just give me the code for this bit, and then add the next bit, and then add the next bit. And the other thing you need to remember that I learned the painful way is that when you're AI coding, the AI doesn't have a particularly good memory. It focuses very heavily on the last few things that you've said. So, for example, if you asked it to put some functionality in early on in the project, and that functionality was added, and you put that code in, and then I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 changes later, you ask for an additional requirement. Don't be surprised to expect that the original changes that were made, the AI won't overwrite them, because in my case it did several times, overwrote things that were working before. So I was being so utterly lazy that I was just taking entire chunks of code, and sometimes the entire code, and just copying it across. And that was where the flaw was. So you just have to focus on the specific job that you're doing at that time. And also you have to keep reminding it to update of your final objective. So in the end, I created a document of the entire objective I was trying to do. And before every change, I used to paste that document in to the AI and said, just to remind you, this is what we're trying to achieve. And then I also had to tell it, don't change anything that's already working. I just want to get this one small part working. Do this with the minimum changes possible. So that's the other thing. The other thing, which actually it really was the key to all of this, and I'm sorry to say it, guys, it's with great pain to tell you this, and particularly, I probably should have led with it. Um, but you're going to need to understand the code that it produces, at least to an extent. You don't need to understand every single command in great detail, but you need to understand each function and what it's trying to achieve. And you also need to get a handle on um, at least an idea of what each line of code is doing within that function to achieve to achieve your objective. And the reason why this is so important is because Anthropic will throw back at you code that doesn't tie in with what you want it to do. It's made its best guess at what you want it to do, but that might not actually be what you want. And if you can look at the code and you understand it at least to a degree, you can very quickly work out that's not going to work or that is going to work. And you can reject its offerings without just cutting and pasting it and testing it, because it's this continual cut and paste and cut and paste and cut and paste that will create a behemoth of horrible, terrible code. So you need to have that basic understanding of code. The other thing I'm going to add is it doesn't produce particularly efficient code. It often uses more lines than it needs to, or it tries to pull in libraries which it doesn't really need to get the results that it wants, and that can be pretty awkward. And particularly from a cybersecurity perspective, and obviously that's very important for us as a company, it does not produce secure code. So when I got the plugin working to some degree, I asked one of our testers to pen test it, and it took him 2 or 3 minutes, maybe not even that, to be honest. I don't even think it took him a minute to find a cross-site scripting vulnerability. The sanitization and the encoding just didn't exist. It didn't seem to be interested. Out of interest, I did go back to it and I said to it, my pen testers looked at this and he said, there's a problem with the code. Please, can you fix it? It's a cross-site scripting vulnerability. And I presented it some information. And it came back with a whole barrel of different ways to do that. And I had my pen tester on the call at the time and I said, look, it's telling me this, this, and this. And he was like, Claude's talking nonsense, right? It doesn't know what he's talking about. That isn't necessary, or that's not going to work. So I said, you know what? Let's just give it the acid test, right? I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to put these changes in place it's recommending, and then you can test it again. So I put in the changes that it recommended, tested it again, and he was absolutely right. It didn't fix the problem. And he kept saying to me, you don't need to do it like that. Just do it like this. But I became quite fascinated with this human coder / pen tester versus AI. I wanted to see how I felt a bit like, when Gary Kasparov took on IBM's Deep Blue, because he said he wanted to win to preserve the dignity of the human mind. I mean, it did get him in the end, to be honest, but that was a kind of fascination that I had. And ultimately the human one. So I got back to the AI and kept saying, listen, my pen tester is telling me this, this, and this. And in the end, after initially the AI saying, no, I think he's wrong. In the end, the AI said, oh, please thank your pen tester very much. I think he's absolutely correct. I apologize for the inconvenience, and I appreciate being informed correctly of how to go about this, which just made me giggle, really. So the AI fully got its arse kicked by a human. So they're the few things there. Yes, you can write code with AI. Is it easy? No. Do you have to learn how to talk to the AI in the right way, set the context, only make small incremental changes? Don't trust it in terms of secure coding? Yes. Can you get working code to a degree of complexity written from AI with minimum programming experience? The answer is yes. but you do need that minimum programming experience. You need to at least have an idea of what's coming back from Claude in that code. Else you're going to get yourself into trouble. Um, so I tried to do it the lazy way without using my brain. Um, and very quickly discovered that wasn't possible. You do have to understand it to a degree in order to utilize it. Having said that, I got the code working. For somebody who isn't a coder, that was quite impressive. I will say the learning experience and the time it took me to do it, quite frankly, I think if I sat down and learnt to code better, I probably could have done it, if I'm honest, in probably the same amount of time as it took me with the AI. Possibly even a little bit less. But the point is, the next project which I need to do, because I've learned the lessons in how to use it to generate the code, it will be far quicker. It will be much, much quicker because I know now how to instruct it in order to get it to create the code. So it's possible if you're willing to learn how to use the AI right and you're willing to learn at least some basic coding. Will that change? Will AI be able to generate code from a high-level human request? Well, not yet. I think until it reaches that point where it's willing to engage you in dialogue to get very clear, to get the instructions clearer, and until it starts to interact with you in such a way that it can tease the information out of you for exactly what it needs, then I don't think we're going to get there. And we're certainly not there yet. Is it coming? I think it's coming. I think it's coming. It's not going to be this month. It may not even be this year. I certainly think within the next 3 or 4 years we're gonna be at a point where AI becomes very proficient at coding. I mean, it's already not bad at coding, but what I mean is it's going to become proficient at understanding what we're asking it to do, what code we're asking it to create, and what it's supposed to do. That's the bit it needs to get better at. Some other interesting points as well is the separation between. So this particular plugin that I created, as I said before, was to create a scoping application where the user would answer a series of questions, and off the back of those questions, a calculation would be made to give an estimate of how long a system penetration test would take. So there's an interesting point about the system logic that sits behind the LLM as well, behind the AI. So the first thing is you have to work out what the LLM can do and what you're going to need to do in terms of code. You need to know where that division is between capability of LLM and what you can do in code. Truthfully, if you could do the whole thing in code, it may be better, but certainly leaning into the LLM, would it be better? I mean, there's certain useful features of the LLM. So, for example, you can type help at a certain point, and the LLM, without me having to provide any code, will provide additional information about the question that's being asked that can help the user to answer it. So, that's maybe something you might have a problem with if you were trying to programmatically do that. It would certainly be quite challenging. Of course, the LLM, the AI, is pretty good at that, sort of fresh out the box, if you like. But one of the problems that I found with creating the appropriate system prompt for the LLM to work with, so all the questions were in the system prompt, and its behavior was also embedded into the system prompt. So Moment tested it for Moment, one of our pen testers, he's awesome actually. He tested it in terms of its security. From a programmatically, and I got my daughter. It was her take your child to work day. Yesterday. So I had her in here in the office with me, and she thrashed the life out of this application, trying to get the LLM to respond to things that were nothing to do with the questions to be asked. And she actually had quite a bit of success, even though I'd sort of set it up to try to tell it not to answer any questions unrelated to the questions for the scoping exercise. She did manage to upset it she managed to get it to so it appeared to be getting frustrated with her. She managed to get it to skip questions, which it shouldn't have done, and in the end, it just stopped working. Right? She put so much text into it and so much nonsense that I think it just it slowed it down so much that it was just taking ages to respond. So I had to then spend a lot of time in the document that I was sending across in the settings, which was actually the system prompt for the AI, to make sure it acted in the same way. And in the end, that document almost resembled code, like really high level pseudocode, because I had to be very regimented in here's the context, here's what you're trying to do, here's how you're supposed to act, here's how you need to respond to nonsense responses. You need to make sure that you keep focusing on the task at hand, etc., etc., etc. And it's quite a lengthy list. And I'll level with it. I used AI to help me write the document as well. I thought, what better way to create the prompt than the AI that's going to be accepting the prompt to act in a certain way? So that helped me. But it ended up being like rule based, like the context was set out, then the rules of behavior, rule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think there was about 12, 13 different rules, important instructions for it to adhere to. And then the questions were underneath, and that's what it used to generate its results. And it's better now, to be honest with you. It's more difficult to get it to misbehave, but of course, the technology is still in its infancy, and the application is still in its beta. So it's good as long as it's used correctly. If it's not used correctly, it's difficult. And I'm going to keep tweaking it. Hopefully, I will get it right ultimately, eventually. But I just wanted to share that journey with you, and again, just to make the point about what to put in the LLM and what to put in the code. So there's certain things you need to make your decisions about that. And the AI, for instance, won't. You can't send emails from the AI. It won't let you do that. You have to put that in the code. So working out where the logic sits between what the large language model can do and what the code can do is tricky and challenging. So I think it's a very exciting time that we're going through right now with AI. Some incredible things that it can do. The amazing potential for coding, not yet mind-blowing, but certainly very useful if you already have a basic understanding of coding. And you know what? It's just going to get better. So I'm quite excited to see what's coming. But anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. And I'm very keen to hear what your thoughts are, your ideas, your experiences. Have you tried any coding with AI? How did you get on with it? Did you have any problems with it? Did it just work? So get back to me, right? Give me some feedback. Let me know how you got on with it and what your thoughts are on it. And if you're a coder, I mean, does it worry you? That potentially, AI could, could it be a threat to your job? I'll level with you. I don't see it at the moment being that way. But yeah, I'd like to hear from you as well. So yeah, there you go. And I certainly think from a cybersecurity perspective as well, it's the whole thing's I'm quite nervous about it, about the potential for AI leaking information. I'm also nervous about the APIs that connect with AI. How secure are they? Have they been set up right? So we're keen to test them, both sides, the LLM logic and the AI and the APIs as well, to make sure they're secure, and of course to make sure the code that makes the calls to the API is secure. So from a cybersecurity perspective, it's something we're very keen to continue to work on. So yeah, there's my feedback. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great evening, night, morning, depending on when you're watching this. See you next time.